Welcome, everyone. I'm Wessa Chow. I'm Executive Director at Per Capita. First of all, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And welcome to these monthly lunches. It's great to see everyone here. And these lunches are in honour of our 41st Premier, John Cain, who's been a really great reformer and progressive thinker. So thank you for being here. Today, because we will be launching our podcast, Homes and Not Houses, you would have seen these flyers. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But for now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Micaela Drieberg. Now, I've known Micaela for many, many years. And she's now the Chief Executive Officer for Gender Equity Victoria, which is also known as VIC, which is an independent body for organisations and individuals promoting gender equality in Victoria. She's a committed feminist and a leader with over 20 years of experience across purpose sectors, including all three levels of government, universities, not-for-profit organisations and big bodies. She's been a mayor at the city of Monash. This is where we met, I think, the first time, and as a ministerial advisor. In addition to her work at GenVic, she's also a teaching associate with Monash University and participates in several government advisory bodies. Thank you, Micaela, and welcome.
Thank you, Wessa. I think I've got my microphone on here, and then I can hear this one projecting as well. So thanks, everyone, for having me here today. I'd like to also acknowledge we're meeting on unceded lands of First Nations people and acknowledge any that are watching here today and any that are with us in the room today too. I'm here to talk about gender equality, hence GenVic. We purposely chose Gender Equity Victoria over gender equality. Do people know the difference? Nodding. I won't preach to the converted, but when I explain it to people that don't quite understand the difference, when we talk about gender equality, it means giving everyone the same thing. When we talk about gender equity, we refer to giving people what they need. So the image that I like to use for people that are more visually is there's a well-known image that's used in gender equality where it shows a group of people trying to look over a fence at a sporting game. When we are, and you can see that some people can see over the fence if they're tall enough. Some people, a little bit more and they might be able to see, and others no hope. When we talk about gender equality, everyone is given a box, the same size box, one box each, and then in theory, they should be able to see over the fence. But that's not always in practice. So the tall person could already see they have an even better view now. The person that was almost there, with that boost, they can see over the fence. But the other person still can't see over the fence. Because we gave everyone the same thing because we were aiming for equality. When we talk about equity, we give people what they need. So if we use that analogy of looking over a fence, the person that already could see, they don't get an extra boost. The person that could just need a little extra boost, they get that one box. The other person might get 2 boxes, or they may get a rare. They get what they need to be able to see over the fence. In more recent years, there's been a change to that image where there's a third, sometimes a fourth one, where to make sure that everyone has an equal chance to view that sporting game, just take the fence away. And it's so obvious. Or you change the fence so it's chain linked or perspex so that you visually see through the fence. And that's what we refer to as justice or systemic change. And you can see where if you focus on systemic change, everyone benefits without some of those unintentional debates about why someone gets something and someone gets more and someone gets nothing. So when Gender Equity Victoria was formed in 2018, that was the discussion that was had, and that's why we landed on gender equity over gender equality. We've actually been around for over 30 years. So in 1994, we established the Body for Women's Health Services, but then evolved under then Fiona Richardson to be able to represent the wider gender equality sector, and came to be in its current form in 2018. We've now almost, 6 years, no, 8 years on, and we look a little different than we did previously. So initially, when we started, we had a lot of support from the Victorian government to be able to create this independent entity. And now we truly are an independent entity where we receive some government funding to deliver projects, and the rest is from philanthropic support or membership fees or fee for service as well. So we are essentially a peak body that has memberships from organisations and individuals that are all working towards a common cause of gender equity. If you're interested in being a part of the movement, I can share some information afterwards. But that's not why I'm here to talk about the current state of gender equality in Victoria and beyond. And for the purpose of today, I'll say gender equality, but throughout it, I'll reinforce why we say equity, because no single person in this room has the same needs. We all have different needs, and by using the term equity, it reflects that understanding that we all have different needs to be able to be the best person that we can be. So who knows how long it is before we reach gender equality? Couple of hands there. I know you guys should know. Anyone else? 2150? What gave it away? Very observant over there. There was a hand up there as well. Yeah, I'm right now. 123 years away from reaching gender equality. So if you round up 2150, earrings are, little conversation starters, and it's amazing how many people will ask me about this on the train or whilst I'm walking down the street. Say, I like your earrings. What does that mean? And it starts a conversation. And as you can imagine, most people are shocked. What do you mean 2150? What do you mean 123 years away? That means that no one in this room will live to see gender equality. Anyone with children will not see gender equality. Your grandchildren might, but who knows what the world will look like then. So when you put in those terms, it's really confronting. But it's important conversation to have because we have had progress. We live a much different life in this room than our parents did and our grandparents did. So we have had progress, but there's still more work to be done. So it's important to recognise where we've taken steps forward, but also if we take our foot off the pedal, we can easily go backwards. You can see that kind of sneaking in now as well. When we talk about this 123 years or 2150, that's at best. That is from the World Economic Forum report, and that is for that predicted number is for places like Australia. Who knows where we are out of 148 countries on that number is Australia?
8.
I heard it 8 higher. Lower, 20. Almost 15, a little bit lower. Almost, a little bit higher. 13. We have a winner. I should have brought prizes and lobbed them over. So yeah, out of 148 countries that are mentioned, Australia sits at number 13. Not bad. Actually up 11 places from the previous year. So Australia is demonstrating progress. And this is measured on 4 key factors of education attainment, of health and survival, of economic participation and opportunity, and political empowerment. So you can see where Australia has progressed in some of these areas. We went up those 11 places because of investment in political empowerment, so women's representation in politics but leadership as well, and economic participation as well. But that could easily go backwards. And we've seen us go up and down in those rankings previously. So it's nothing to go, yay us, because the reality is we've only ever had one woman Prime Minister. We've had 2 women premiers in Victoria. And just because we have 3 leaders right now going into an election that are women doesn't mean we'll retain the gender parity that we have in Victorian politics right now. We've seen it go backwards in all sorts of different areas. In the previous life, I wasn't there at the first year I was there, we were gender equal. We were young, most of us were under 30, we were culturally diverse. The next term, it went backwards. There was 2 out of 11 that were elected, and I suspect one of the women did an accent, a wonderful accent, she was amazing, but it went backwards. And so did the cultural makeup, and so did the progressiveness. So if you go, yes, that we're done, there's a real risk of going backwards. So when we celebrate achievements, we need to make sure that they progress. If we look at those 148 countries across the world, no, it's not Afghanistan. Good guess. It's not America. Do you want to take a guess for America out of 148? Lower than 86? About half of that. So it's 42. So out of Western countries, without double checking, they're probably the lowest. And going into this next report, I'd be curious to see if they go further down or if they miraculously increase. I somehow don't see how, but you never know. The last country on that list is Pakistan. And remember, there's 2 probably pillars there where there's progress to be made, and that's around health and survival, and that's around education attainment and economic participation as well. Probably all 4 pillars, arguably. So if you're looking for an interesting bedtime read, the World Economic Forum is looking at where countries sit based on what pillars, and hazarding a guess or looking into research as to what's led them to that point, but also what are the levers that can be pulled to change those rankings. We've seen Australia in 1 year go up 11 places because of investments in areas that start to address the gender imbalances. I spoke about how we've had progress and then some of you would have noticed last year that the National Opposition Leader had Susan Lake elected as their first woman leader of the opposition. She lasted 9 months. So you get progress and it moves backwards. The USA, America, has never had a woman leader. Never. They've had 2 chances in recent elections with Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, and it didn't happen. As a woman of colour, I was so excited when Kamala was nominated as president candidate, but I was also sad because I knew it wasn't about to happen. And when you represent being a woman, but more than that as well, it's even more deeply disappointing. It's you don't want to have a woman lead your country, and you certainly don't want to be a woman of colour. That's what it feels like when you might resonate with a candidate like that. So we have progress, but it can still. My family hail from Sri Lanka, who is the first country in the entire world to have a woman as Prime Minister. 1960, Surimavo Bandaranaike was elected as the first female Prime Minister in the world. When I went to visit Sri Lanka a couple of years ago with my family, I looked high and low to see some sort of commemoration, some sort of recognition of being the world first. Nothing. Which was deeply disappointing when you think about the other monuments that will be around. There's a couple of buildings that are named after her, but you have to come to them. And people matter, place names matter. Recognising the contributions of everyone is really important, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our Put Her Name on It initiative in a little bit, that recognises the role that women have played historically and how they're recognised in public places around us. Leadership is another really key area where we want to make sure that we're seeing representation of our communities around us. At this moment in time, women hold 40% of ASX 100 board positions and 38% of ASX 200 board positions. Getting there, but not equal. On government board positions, Australian ones, 54.3% are women, which is fantastic, which is due to legislation and which is due to focus on those positions. With that comes debate about merit and who's the best person for the board position. But without quotas, without a focus on making sure that we have equal representation, we're really at risk of having the same types of people represent us on boards and in politics. In Victoria, we also have a requirement for 50% positions. The state-funded sporting bodies, the minimum requirement is around 40%. So a little less, but getting there. There's a 40-20% ruling there. So at least 40% women, at least 40% men, and then 20% in between. My family are big Melbourne Storm fans. Women on their board. I'm gonna have to double think that fan part. But it just goes to show, like, this still is around today. You know, we think, tick, we've got gender equality sorted. There's a reason why Melbourne Storm don't have a women's team, and most of the other NRL teams do. I recently was at a stadium in Auckland for the rugby league team, and as I walked in, there was a massive mural of two players, a man and a woman. It says it's a really strong symbolic gesture there to recognise that they're athletes are equal. I've never seen that before. It might exist, but it stood out to me. It recognised that all their athletes are equal. I'm technically an Essendon supporter. I go to a Hawks game, but yes, I fall to the dark side of NRL. Don't judge me with it falling to the dark side of the NRL. But when I see some of these stats that I've been talking about, representation and how many people are on boards and how many people are in leadership positions, I think to myself, well, what sort of women? Because it's just measured on that one data set in terms of gender. If you start, and again, local government-itis, if you start of how many women represent their communities as a mayor, for example, or as a local government councillor, but as a board and a leader, if you add age to that, it'll tell you a different story. If you add cultural background to that, it'll tell you another story. If you ask ability questions, it'll tell you another story. So the disaggregated data is the term that we use. If you start digging deeper, asking for additional information that goes beyond gender, it tells you different stories that can be quite confronting as well. When we talk about 50% women, is it Anglo-Saxon women over a certain age? Is it younger people? Is it a particular background? What's enabling different types of people to represent that? What's holding them back? What are the barriers? And without counting that information, can't manage what isn't monitored. And so Gen VIC, we've got a really strong focus on equity. We've got a really strong focus on intersectionality. So whilst we start with gender, it's digging deeper. It's asking the hard questions, demanding for that data to be captured so that we can accurately know who's representing us, who's having access to opportunities and where the barriers are and how we can address them. Before I go on, I might stop and see if anyone has any questions. I know there's on the end, but clarify.
We'll tell us something about what's in the school curriculum subject.
So,
how much can our children go to school?
Yeah.
One form or another. So how much of this subject is in the school curriculum now?
so the question was around how much of this school curriculum in our education system. Victoria likes to promote a program called someone jump in. Sorry? Respectful Relationships, which is what's promoted when we talk about gender equality. It's talking about respect for genders, but there are contradictions. So majority of leaders in school systems, principals, majority men, despite it being a majority women-dominated industry. Is some progress in terms of job sharing and co-leadership roles that allow women to progress in this position, but not a lot. But when you talk about curriculum, it would be dependent on the school to a degree. So whilst government schools have certain requirements to meet human rights, that's not always the case with places like independent schools and faith-based schools. I often am commenting about uniforms as a prime example of that, where my children go to a faith-based school, but I chose that school because the student off their own bat said students can wear what they want here. Girls can wear pants. If a boy wanted to wear a dress, they can do that. There's nothing restricting there. And boys can have long hair, they can wear earrings. When you go to the other schools, they've only just, if girls can uniform, I bet there's a whole bunch of us in this room that didn't even have a choice to wear pants. When we went to high school, I certainly was one of them. When you go to schools outside of government, it's really up to the school as well. And the boys' schools are the worst offenders. There are plenty of prestigious boys' schools where they can't have long hair. They can't wear earrings. They can't wear jewellery. It may seem like it's to present well, but if a girls' school has policies around tied back in, plain sleepers, clean nail polish, what's the argument for why a boys' school can't? It's actually reinforcing a stereotype. So in terms of the curriculum, I can't give you a definitive answer. It's not my forte, but I look around the policies, around things like uniforms, around the materials that they read, and it's still littered with gender stereotypes. And when I speak to places like Stella, they give out the Stella Prize for authors, and I've spoken to the departments in Victorian government, where they talk about it's really hard to find books for young men in particular to read that gives them an aspirational role, that gives them a character to aspire to be, that breaks those stereotypes. We're getting really good with girls and giving them fierce leaders and fierce positions to aspire to, but we're still behind with boys as well. So there's a lot more work to be done in the education setting, and we recognise that, and we'd love to do more about that. So if anyone has any thoughts with that, we'd certainly welcome it. But some of those things that you see, but you don't always notice. If you look at gender cycling, for example, it dips off the girls at a young age and then climbs back up again at 18. That is a direct correlation with uniforms. If girls are required to wear dresses and skirts and aren't comfortable riding bikes, there has to be a direct link there. So you see this sort of stuff every single day, and we tend to not question it, or once it's pointed out, you can't unsee it. I might move on in the interest of time, because I have like 2 minutes left, and keep going. A couple of other things I just wanted to point out was around economic participation. So, in Australia, we have a 21% pay gap. And that means essentially on average for every man that earns $1, the woman will earn 88% of that in terms of base salary, or 79 cents for the total earnings. Which state do you think in Australia has the biggest pay gap? Yes, she says with victory in her eyes. Western Australia does. But that's down to a number of different things. So it's caregiving responsibilities, it's workplace discrimination and bias, but it's also industry segregation. So the mining industry there has had a big gap on WA, and my family also lives in WA, so I love WA. But they do. They're at 28%. They are significantly higher than the rest of the country. Who knows who's got the lowest pay gap? Tasmania. Yeah, Tasmania's at 10%. And again, a reflection of a range of different things there, but it's measured on caregiving, on industry segregation, so over dominance of one gender in an industry over another, which impacts your ability to earn as well. And then that workplace discrimination and bias, which I don't by no means need to skim over, but it's around the roles of women in senior management and CEO positions. We're also fresh off the federal and the state budgets, which, a little hope. I was in the lockup in Victoria, and when people go, "Oh, what was it like in there?" I said, "It was a little bit blurred." There wasn't. We went into it knowing there wouldn't be anything too exciting to announce, but it was still just a little bit of a reaction from a gender equality perspective. People were pleased to retain what they had, the status quo, but for most people it was 1 year, and they spent the last number of years with a lot of time and energy to retain the funds that they were receiving, ideally increase to keep up with demand, and given a 1 year gap to start the cycle all over again. In the previous budget, two really key programs were cut, one around gender equity in sports and the other one around women leadership programs. They were really sad cuts to have seen, unexpected to have seen. So we're really pleased with this budget to see women in leadership back again, but a fraction of the amount. And we're actively working with the sporting sector to be able to going in terms of progress we've made in terms of gender equity in sports. A whole other topic of conversation, so I won't go into that today as well. One other thing I just thought I'd leave you with in terms of we're talking about workplace participation and how we can start to address that. There are so many policy levers that are being pulled where we're seeing increases in parental leave. It goes up to 26 weeks in July. Primary carers and the secondary carer both have access to share that. We now have superannuation paid on top of that. But there are other countries in the world where you get an entire year. And dads in particular are actively encouraged to pursue that. In July, the secondary carer, 4 weeks is reserved specifically for them. So again, encourage you to actively take a role in parenting. Policy levers are one thing, cultural change is another. Just this week, I had Mr. Seven quite unwell, promising constantly. I saw Dad getting dressed to go to work in the morning, and I turned to him and I was like, "So, how's the school run going to go this morning?" While I drop off Mr. 9, just take Mr. 7 with you. And then he had to stop and go, "Oh, well, I guess I'll go drop off Mr. 9." Really disgruntled. Not, "Oh crap, oh my God, no, we can't put him in the car. I'll take him." It's still really entrenched, and and he's an active father. He takes on these things. He's done more than Dad has, but it's still a fraction of what Mum does. I, like a number of other CEOs that are women, still identify as a primary carer, whereas most men that are CEOs or executives have a full-time wife. So those sorts of stories you'll hear all the time. I get the birthday invitations, I RSVP, I get the birthday presents, there's lots of laughing going on in the room. Occasionally I'll shoot myself in the foot and just watch and see what will happen if I do it. And guess what? It doesn't happen. But, until we have cultural change, we see these changes. And it's starting to happen. Disgruntled dad is like, "Well, I've got to, don't I?" Doesn't want to, but knows he has to because society's changing. The expectation's changing. Why should Mum, the CEO, take the day off, run a sick kid in the car to get the other kid off to school, while someone just waltzes out the door? I'm adamant if we really want to see gender equality, it starts. What we do in workplaces is really important, but what we model to our children, to society, is really important. And I'm just as guilty. I have to actively turn to another dad and say, "Oh, so when so-and-so's party, what have you got organised?" I love doing that. Or God forbid someone's got an RSVP with Mum or Dad on the invite. I send it to Dad, double check with Mum that she got the RSVP, but I do that. My favourite thing to do on a train is when there's a couple of men with their legs wide out like this, sitting in the seat in between. I usually have a woman opposite me going. So there's little acts of microfeminism we can do every single day. to actively push back on some of the gender stereotypes that are littered from day dot, from the gender reveals that happen when people are pregnant through to cradle to the grave, as we say in the health world. So my call to action to all of you is to actively look out for those opportunities, to push back, to ask the question. I recently had a neighbour talking to me about how sexist the kinder system is. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, it's just, expecting, he was trying to be an ally, bless his heart. And so, it's expecting mums to be able to work, to work part-time so they can do the cook-offs and the pick-ups and sexist. I said, is there a policy that the dads can't do the drop-offs and the pick-ups? No, there wasn't. And he got quiet after that. He came from a really great place, but he didn't realise his argument was being sexist as well. It's in us, and we need to actively still shake it off. And we're seeing this with more men taking up primary carers leave, still 20%, but an increase all the more, so you've got to celebrate the wins. And the last thing I just wanted to mention as well, because I can feel that you're not lining me up, Wessa, but I can feel the need, is around in Victoria, with recent ministerial reshuffles, we've had a Minister for Women and Girls installed in Minister Gabrielle Williams. I personally love that it includes girls. It recognises that gender equality goes across all ages, early years, and I'm talking earliest, 0 onwards, not high school, it's too late, is important. There's also a Minister for Men and Boys. There's also a Minister for Equality, and there's a Minister for Children, and a Minister for Prevention of Family Violence. Does that confuse you? A little. Does it unintentionally send a message? Does it unintentionally fragment a sector that is already segmented in terms of, do we focus on women? What about men? How do we include this in? How do we go across all ages? How do we go across all genders? And so something we're actively asking our members and people that we're connecting with is it time for gender equality? I don't know the answer, but it feels fragmented right now. And we've got to look for a way for us all to work together so all Victorians have an opportunity to thrive. I haven't had a chance to tell you about a couple of other things that Gen VIC are doing. The 2 projects that I encourage you to look through our website or have a chat with me about is Unequal Laws. The project where we are actively looking at Victorian legislation and policy and identifying where it's either gender blind or unintentionally or intentionally, historically, gender biased, and how can we tweak that legislation to be more inclusive. And if you think about once upon a time, women couldn't have bank accounts, they couldn't have mortgage, they couldn't own land. There will be some sneaky stuff like that that still exists in legislation, hopefully never acted on, but needs to be changed. And then there are unintentional ones that might not allow a man to take a more active role in parenting, for example. There are ones that consciously impact on gender over another. Think about health in particular. We've up until only recently recognised that men and women have different health issues, present differently, are treated differently. Well, no, they're not treated differently. They're not diagnosed differently. We're flying blind when it comes to health issues. So we're looking at really practical legislative levers that we can change there. It's a different approach to advocacy. It's the one we all aspire to, I think, evidence-based. We're going down, here's the problem, and here's our recommended solution. So if you're interested in that, I really encourage you to Naomi Smith, who's on the last day of internship placement with us today, was a part of that project, so you can talk to Naomi. And Henny, that's over there as well, was a consultant that worked with us initially on the first stage. The second initiative is put a name on it, and that's about recognising women in public places. So that's around, if you didn't know, there are more places named after animals than there are of real women in Victoria and across the globe as well. And it's not recognising the contributions that women have made, but often that history doesn't exist. It's a number 1 action in our equal state, the Gender Equality Strategy in Victoria. Our aim was to reach 70% of new place names to be named after women by 2027. With active focus on that, we achieved it last year. But a really tiny investment of $200,000 a year. So it's, with concerted effort, things can be made. And what I love about putting a name on it is systemic change. It's there for life. It's people can see the contributions that women have made, people throughout their communities, that reflects entire communities when they walk down the street, when they drive past the building. They see themselves and what they can be. So that's about it from me. Apologies for going over slightly, but it was great to speak to you, and I'm happy to expand on anything that people wanted to know.
Yeah, we probably have time for
I just think, one of the biggest inequalities is that men keep killing women, and the barrier that women's safety, where does all that fit in?
So if you couldn't hear that, it was around women's safety and the fact that I don't mean to say that offhand at all. It's such a complex issue. I purposely didn't touch it in this instance. Gender equity absolutely goes hand in hand with primary prevention. We hear time and time again about how it's a national crisis, and yet more women are killed every day. Again, it blows your mind that this gendered violence exists, especially if you come from a world that feels equal, that feels respectful. I don't have an answer for you, but if we start at the very beginning, if we start with children and there's a respect and that gender stereotypes are addressed in the young age, then there's hope for the future. If we focus solely on the middle years, it's a band-aid. I come from a health background. It's the ambulance and the cliff. It's addressing the problem, but not the root of the cause. Again, I could talk about that forever, but thank you for acknowledging that.
We'll take both of these.
Thanks very much for your very informative talk. I was sitting here thinking that 50 years ago, that a lot of what you're talking about, especially in relation to parents and children and the work that was talked about, and still today, it's nowhere like it. But the question I was wanted to ask you was, if it's 2,100 is the year, is that when a country like Australia would get there, or when a country like Pakistan would get there?
No, it's at best. So it's an opportunity for Australia. For countries like Pakistan, it's more like 300 years away, which is where it's important to work globally. But the beauty of this as well is that we can beat those projections. So with effort and with investment and with monitoring and management, we can hopefully beat those projections. So it's actually less than that. So hopefully our children can experience it, and countries around the world can.
The last question.
Again, thank you so much for the talk. I was also musing on the situation at the moment. Like Julia, July, it was recently pointing out that we are in the middle of a very serious and strategic and incredibly well-funded backlash that is targeting women's reproductive rights, and as well as that LGBTIQA+ communities in the aim of kind of moving through that expression. How can women's movements, in this sense, as you've mentioned, what can be happening in the women's space and the coalition graphics that are being targeted? We are seeing the culture wars kind of born on extremism that women are being targeted. So how do we treat at all levels of government?
I think there's recognition of the backlash, and it's young people that's really concerning, where generally speaking are feeling like they're not receiving the same opportunities that women are. So again, this is just my opinion, but I feel like a part of it is that perpetrator focus, that victim blaming, rather than proactively working together for everyone to have similar opportunities. It's by no means the only answer, but I can see as a mum sons where they're questioning not so their opportunities, but more so, why do you have your own restrict women. Is that a problem? If you come from a certain bubble, that's your norm. And if you come from another frame of reference where women might be not treated in the same way or men are treated another way, that's your norm. And it's widening those minds that I think are really essential. It's not around gender as such, but I remember chatting to a mum that came from an African country, white African, who was saying she left Africa to come to Australia because her children just weren't going to have the same opportunities. And I wanted to laugh in her face because that was years of oppression that Black Africans have experienced. And now because this particular family didn't have rite of passage to be at the front of the line, they felt like their opportunities had been taken away. And she absolutely believed that, and I could see how. And so I think that analogy helps me to understand how some parts of our communities feel like their rights are being taken away. So that's where I think systemic change is really important. If we go back to the first analogy of the boxes and where there's debate about why someone gets a box and someone didn't get a box, I think if we talk about systemic change where everyone benefits, it'll hopefully help that argument, but I don't have a silver bullet. It's generational change, and it's going to take all of us to work together.
Yeah, thank you, Micaela.
No worries, thank you. Oh, yes.
Talking about how important it is to have environment, to make sure that we are actually creating environments where women thrive. We're very, very pleased to be launching our podcast, Homes Not Houses. It's our season 2 of our podcast, which basically examines Australia's housing system through the lens. So we've got our episodes up now, and it's on our website and also on our YouTube channel. We've got episode 1, which is now available, and it's really the when we were actually talking about this podcast, we were really thinking about, well, when it comes to housing, and we've got Kate a lot more about this. When we talk about housing, how important it is to ensure that the housing system actually works for women. And so that's what our podcasts and will talk about, and what that means, and what do we need to think about to actually make sure that happens. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Australians Investing in Women. We've got Julie Riley here. Thank you for being here, and also YWCA, and unfortunately Kate can't be here. And we've got the other Kate, which Dr. Kate Rayner, who was our director of the Centre for Equitable Housing, and she just finished off, but she's still connected with us at Per Capita and still a fellow. And I will now invite Kate to talk a little bit more about this podcast.
Just going to change this for my notes. Thank you.
I'm the short ones that need extra.
How many people does it take to turn on a microphone? Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Wessa, and thank you also for the opportunity to bring this passion project to life. It was very much effort, and thank you, Beck, for being the mastermind of the editing. This has been really wonderful. I'm going to speak about it very quickly because I know we only have a little bit of time. But the second season of Homes Not Houses was really about answering the question of what would a genuinely gender equitable housing system look like. And we know a lot about the problems. We've discussed this today. For everyone in the room is across this topic, you probably wouldn't be here. So we really wanted to do a positive framing about how can we shift the way that we think about this? How can we put forward the solutions? And the other thing I really wanted to put into the world is that we understand the concept of the gender pay gap. We talk about that all the time, but we also have a gender housing gap. And putting that into our lexicon and the way we talk about this issue is really important. And so it's been good to be able to prosecute that argument. I want to acknowledge, like Wessa did, both Australians Investing in Women and YWCA, predominantly because they're our sponsors, but also very much because the work we did with them has really informed the podcast. And I'm sure Julie will talk about this more, but one thing I really loved about a project we did with Australians Investing in Women is that we spoke to over 100 organisations across Australia. And what we heard is that we still need to be putting forward the business case for thinking about gender in housing. Sometimes I get stuck in a bubble where I think everyone knows this, it's so obvious, but that's not the case. So we're really working on that. We also need to be sharing our learning and gathering data. And by God, it is so hard to find gender disaggregated data on pretty much everything, and also in housing. So that's a mission that we're on as well. And we heard a call for a community of practice, or a way for this industry to keep moving forward, the sector to keep moving forward in a collaborative fashion. And also just the need to institutionalize change, to move gender from a niche issue to business as usual in how we think about everything. So very grateful to Australians Investing Women and Julie for the opportunity to work on that. I also want to acknowledge YWCA, which is a community provider and a fund of ours, and we've just finished a piece of work with them looking at the cost-benefit ratio for gender responsive housing. And what we found was that for every $1 invested in gender responsive housing, you end up with about $2.15 of value. But if you look at different households and you look at, for example, a family with a mother and 2 children, that figure gets much, much bigger. It gets up to $4.60 mark. Like it's a really big number. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that if a woman is experiencing family violence and she's deemed to not have a safe place to keep her children, she runs the risk of having her children taken away from her. And the cost, the emotional cost, but also the financial cost of out-of-home care is ridiculous. And that's a lot of what is driving that cost-benefit ratio, to put it into numbers. So grateful for YWCA for the right to do, for the privilege to do that work. Hampered by the fact that there's a lack of gender disaggregated data. But across both pieces of work, we know that women earn less and so have less capacity to access housing. We know that women need more housing as well, driven by the fact that they're more likely to be primary caregivers of their children, to be more likely to be single parents, and also that they have unique pathways through housing and homelessness that we don't capture as much as we could. And so the final thing I'll say is that, to come back to this idea of a positive framing, the whole podcast is built around this concept of change. So how can we change our built form to have more gender responsive homes? How can we change our financial system to make home ownership and renting and mortgages more gender responsive? How can we change our legal systems to protect women at periods of risk? And so I've had a wonderful time working on this, and I've spoken to from CXNet, Julie Riley from Australians Investing in Women, Laura Marnie from Windana, formerly Launch Housing, Jackie Galloway from Peninsula Community Legal Centre, from YWCA, Nicole Calms from Monash University, Leonora Rees from QUT, and Carolyn Whiteson, who's a Canadian housing scholar. And so across this whole spectrum of speakers, because we've been working through this concept, a wonderful process for me, and I hope that it goes out into the world and is a wonderful thing for other people to listen to. So thank you very much.
And now he's very tall. Thank you, Kate. And now I want to introduce Julie Riley, who's CEO of Australians Investing in Women. He is, as we mentioned, one of our podcast sponsors. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa, and particularly thanks to Kate, who's been, I'm going to say, my partner in crime or good things. I'll try and get that to stay there. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you and encourage you to listen to this series of podcasts. I was really happy to be involved in it, and I'm particularly happy to be in the room with people who care so much about these issues. So I really want to thank you for the part that you play as citizens in actually bringing these kind of issues to the fore. So at Australians Investing in Women, for those who don't know us, our role is to work with philanthropy and investors to embed the gender lens in giving and in investment across capital markets. So if you think before about Micaela's example of the fence, the sporting event boxes, gender lens is about actually seeing what the ground boxes and the fences are specifically for women, so that in any decision about where capital is allocated, whether it's philanthropic giving or broader investment, there's a really conscious understanding of how that's going to impact women and what you might need to do differently to make sure that they benefit. A simple task, one would think. But alongside governments, philanthropy and investors have a really critical role to play in the housing, meeting the current housing crisis. Philanthropy in particular can fund advocacy that changes policy, and as well as investors who actually will invest in bricks and mortar and create homes. So, we're really delighted to be here with people like Women's Property Initiatives and others who work on these kind of solutions every day. Importantly, what philanthropy and investors can do is make sure there's an intentional gender lens on giving. And we've been really fortunate to partner in recent years with Per Capita. It was actually a Per Capita presentation that first opened my eyes to the power or the problem that's around capital gains tax concessions, and it really blew my mind. It sort of launched us on this path, to be honest, around developing a roadmap for what it would look like to create a gender equal housing system. So telling the story of that work and why it matters is what this podcast series is about. And I think even listening to Micaela and others today, it's the conversation that sometimes brings the hard policy to life. More than 5 million Australians listen to podcasts every month, making podcasts one of the fastest growing forms of media in this country. So they've become a really trusted way that people understand and engage with complex ideas. And there are few issues more complex and more personal and more urgent in Australia than housing. It's now consistently referred to, and this is no surprise to anyone, as one of the most critical issues in cost of living. So podcasts being the modern version of the public square, we really encourage you and invite you to tune in. And I can say, I think Dr. Leonora Riss is the first person, and she's an absolutely awesome gender advocate who brings these things to life. As someone who cares deeply about affordable housing for everyone, and particularly cares about gender equity, I really commend this series to you. And I speak not just as a professional advocate, but someone who has personal experience in this. My mother left a very violent home in the 60s with 4 children, 5 and under, and it was only through the provision of housing that we actually had any chance of creating a new life in a safe environment. So I speak both with my head and my heart about why this is so important, and I really hope that there's some feedback from each of you too about what you think of the podcast. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And we hope you can tune in. Make sure you tune in and we'll stay connected as well. Love your feedback. If you have any, send them through. We will take them on, and hopefully we can continue this conversation and the importance of this conversation as well. So thank you everyone for coming. Our next lunch will be on Wednesday, the 17th of June, with Matthew Harding, author of Charities and Politics, a Principled Approach. So he's the author for that book. So I'll see you next month. Thank you.